Hello, Amy Lang, Birds and Bees and Kids. This is your podcast, newsletter, video about how to communicate with your neurodivergent kid about crushes and crushing. If you want to do yourself a little bit of a favor for a more in-depth guide into just crushes in general, listen to my first video of it, or whatever this is, podcast about how to talk to kids in general about crushes. So I will cover a little bit of that right now. If you need more help talking and communicating with your neurodivergent kid about sex, I have a new thing called Start Here, and it is a three-pack as opposed to a six-pack of short videos about consent, talking about sex, and then something that's really important, which I'll touch on here, is myths people have about children and neurodivergent children and sexuality. So link is in the show notes, wherever you're listening, watching, etc. Okay. A crush is when you have strong romantic feelings for someone, another person. And crushes are an idealized version of that person. It's really all in our head what they're like. I mean, we might, usually we're attracted to how they look, right? And it's not a real relationship. So it's really a kind of a fantasy. And when with neurodivergent kids, it can be hard to understand, depending on their level of support needs. It can be kind of hard to understand what that means, the difference between fantasy and reality. Oftentimes, neurodivergent kids will be like, I'm hardcore crushing on this person, and maybe this is all happening in their head. And they assume the other person is feeling the same way. And so it's important to talk about how crushes go one way, right? They're your personal crush. It's not necessarily happening for the other person. And one of the myths is that neurodivergent people, particularly autistic people, aren't capable of having romantic feelings or having sexual or romantic relationships. And that is just not true. It might look different for them. It might sound different for them. The whole thing might be different for them. But if you assume your child is not sexual in any way and you're using that as an excuse to not talk with them, that's not fair to them. And I get it. I know I probably said this 30,000 times. Anyway, you know where I'm headed, so I'm not going to say that anymore. So just assume your child may very well have a crush on someone. And so when you're communicating with them about what's happening, you definitely need to talk about how it can be a physical feeling in their body, right? When you have a crush with someone, you can feel a real tug towards them. Like one of the people I had a crush on as an adult, I was very tugged on towards him. Granted, it was more sexual than with like an 8, 9, 10-year-old, but that pull, right? That curiosity, that interest can have a physical feeling. It also can be confusing because that person may not feel the same way, but you're having that strong feeling, your child's having that strong feeling, and they, like I said, may just assume the other person is as well. Having trouble reading reading their faces, that kind of stuff. And so when they're feeling some way and then they're trying to interact with that person and they can't tell that kind of sometimes like, I'm not into you look, right? Most of us get that look. If you're watching me, you can see me doing the I'm not into you look. They don't read that very well. And so talking about body language a little bit with them to help them navigate this. The other thing you need to talk with them about, which can also be very confusing, are their peers. So their peers may ask them, who do you have a crush on? Who do you have a crush on? And your sweet child may be like, nobody. And what the hell are you talking about? Because this isn't something that's in their interest set, right? They're not ready for this. This isn't coming up for them. And part of the reason for that is I'm looking at middle schoolers, right? Is because oftentimes neurodivergent kids are kind of running on a 2-year social emotional delay. So not delay, whatever, they're behind. They're neurotypical peers, so this makes it twice as confusing. So there can be pressure, like, "Hey, who do you like?" And your kid's like, "I don't know, I don't like anyone." And also, 2 to 3% of neurodivergent kids are LGBTQ, and which can include being asexual and aromantic. So they're just not interested, right? So just helping them understand that this is a part of life. This is a part of being a sexual person, being interested in relationships, that kind of thing. And, just reassuring them that it's really confusing. It's confusing for everyone, right? And the last thing, I didn't say this in the one before, but talk about your own crushes. Talk about your experience of crushes, your friends, their crushes, that kind of thing when you were a kid, because that also normalizes it. And always when we share our non-traumatic stories with our kids, it's connecting. So, that's all I can think of to say about that. I think my big takeaways are to assume crushing is going to be a part of their life in some way. Maybe they have them themselves, their peers are going to talk about them. And so you need to make sure they understand what they are, how they work, so that they can better negotiate it. All right. What am I also going to say to you? That's it. I need to know what you need to know. So feel free to plop in wherever you've got comments or send me an email. It's amy@birdsandbeesandkids.com. Okay. I will see you, I don't know, in a month or so. And keep an eye out for my replays in the middle of the month. I usually do, I used to call them chirps. So short, little like definition of something when I had my fancier podcast. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying this because it's way easier on me. And I bet it's easier on you. Okay, bye.